Welcome to Odds.com's breakdown of UFC Fight Night Wednesday, May 13th, by Star Memorial Arena in Jacksonville, Florida. And we are talking the preliminary card, the second half of the preliminary card, 3 fights. This video starts off with a breakdown of the women's bantamweight bout, and we have our best guys, our best MMA analysts on the scene. We have Clint, star of the Die Hard MMA podcast, and Boston Nick, a.k.a. Mr. Fat Fist, ready to find angles to get us paid on Wednesday night. We're talking women's bantamweight bout, 5'4" American Sijara Sarge Eubanks, 5-4-0. Huge favorite for a woman who's won 5 of 9 fights, minus 350, going up against a fellow knucklehead, 5'6" Canadian Sarah Cheesecake Moras at plus 275. Boston Nick, break this down. Is there an angle for us?
I actually just might have found an angle because something just popped up there on a certain website. But Eubanks should never, ever be a minus 355 or minus whatever she is right now in the 300s to anybody in the UFC, in my opinion. But Sarah Moras, like I said, Moras is the best thing about her. Her striking is not crisp. I mean, Eubanks is better everywhere, in my opinion. She's stronger. Her jiu-jitsu is on a way different level. She does gas a little bit, Eubanks, but I don't think she'll gas here against Moras. I really think that Moras has nothing to bring to the table to make Eubanks, gas. But I do like what just popped up right now is a fight not to go the distance. You can get that at almost plus 200 odds. I believe it's plus 170 right now. You can get the fight not to go the distance. I think Eubanks will get her out of there. I can't parlay Eubanks at that price. You never know. Moras could, you never know, snap on some sort of fancy submission, or Eubanks could gas, and Moras takes advantage. That being said, though, she has fought Pudilova, and I do believe Moras has fought Pudilova, and I do believe that, or I think that Eubanks would handle Pudilova pretty easily. So my pick here, or play, I should say, my pick is Eubanks, but my play is fight not to go the distance at plus 170.
Plus 170 not to go the distance. Clint, talk to us. How do we make cash on this women's bantamweight bout?
You know, Jimmy, I think the absolute best way to make cash on this fight is to steer clear away from it. Keep that cash in your pocket. There is a better spot coming on down the card. Sijara Eubanks is a big, big favorite, and there's a reason she's a big favorite. She is out. She has better skills. She is far more well-rounded than Sarah Moras in every aspect of the game. She's a high-level grappler. I believe she's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. She is stronger. She is thick. She likes to press her opponents up against the cage. When she fought Aspen Ladd, not her last fight, but the one before that, she looked phenomenal in round 1. In fact, she was able to out-grapple Aspen Ladd in the first round, which is saying something big. Aspen Ladd is one of the hottest rising prospects in this division. The problem with Sarah is, just like my boy Boston Nick said, she gasses out hard. She's only got about 7 minutes in her, so about halfway through the second round, she's just going to completely run out of steam. Now, Cheesecake, on the flip side of this thing, she's going to be the smaller fighter in this case. In fact, from what I've heard, she is working on dropping down to 125. So she may even come in light in this fight, and that's going to be a disadvantage for her, facing someone who tends to miss weight and comes in at the very limit or over the limit in some cases. Cheesecake has decent submissions off of her back. She's very flexible. She's got good hips. She's got a very defensive guard. She's able to recover that guard if her opponents manage to pass. So all this comes down to is, will she be able to survive the onslaught for the first half of this fight? Because eventually Sarge is going to gas out, and Sarah will have an opportunity in the third round to come back and steal this fight away. That's exactly what happened to Sarge in her last fight, and I have not forgiven her. I made the mistake of parlaying Sijara Eubanks when she faced Betch Kohea, who is one of the worst fighters on the UFC roster, and I thought it was just a slam dunk home run bet, and she got tired, man. Betch managed to weasel her way back in that fight, did enough to win on the judges' scorecards, and messed up my evening. I will not make that mistake again, and I'm trying to save you from making the same mistake. Just
Clint,
don't bet Sijara Eubanks at this price.
You might have got robbed though on that. I think CR won that. Eubanks won that fight, but I hear you on that one. It wasn't worth the parlay, right?
I think she did enough to win. I agree with you. She probably should have been given the nod, but it was close enough that I cannot call it a robbery. You can't let it go to the judges, man. Dana White says it all the time. Do not let the fight hit the judges' scorecards. You never know what they're looking at. You never know what they're valuing. And in this case, it bit her and me in the ass.
Clint, you were telling us yesterday how Sarah Moras has been in training for a long time with her boyfriend. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, so she has a significant other who's also an MMA fighter. He had a fight coming up in December in 2019 that got canceled. So they started training. His fight gets canceled and rebooked. So they stayed in fight camp. That fight camp got extended through the first couple months of 2020. Well, then the coronavirus hits and his fight gets canceled. But she gets scheduled up against Sijara Eubanks. So he stays in camp to assist her. So she's essentially been in a hardcore training camp for 5 straight months, Jimmy. This may be the best version that we see of Sarah Moras, or that we have ever seen of Sarah Moras.
And
she might come in sharp. Dog? And she's still not a live dog. So here's the thing. She might be able to snap up a submission late. If Sijara gets tired, if Sijara gets sloppy, that opportunity is definitely there. But Cheesecake is 32 years old. She is a 500 fighter. She's not at this level. And this is not the age where you see people start to make drastic improvements to their game. Sarge is probably the very worst case scenario fighter for her. Someone who is big, strong, and is going to stifle her and just stay on top of her. The only way she has a window is if Sarge gets sloppy. We know that can happen, but I don't think that the line sucks both ways, Jimmy. I don't want to lay this much on Sarge, and it's not a big enough plus line for me to feel good about taking Moras.
Yeah, and I agree. I love Cheesecake. I love Moras, but I can't take Sarah Moras. So
let's move on to the lightweight bout. This is an exciting one. 5'10" American Michael the Menace Johnson, 20-15-0, 35 fights. We got to pick him here. -110 on MJ, going up against 5'9" Brazilian Thiago Moises, 12-4-0. A pick'em, Clint. Get us paid.
It's an interesting spot here, Jimmy. It's pick'em again, kind of for a reason. And it's so interesting to me because Thiago Moises was a guy who came in and we had such high expectations for him. His dad is a lifelong MMA fighter, so he's got that experience. He's got that knowledge handed down to him. He's got this slick kicking skill set. He can attack your legs. He can attack your body. He's light on the feet. He moves well. He's a sick grappler. I believe he's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. If he gets you on the mat, if he gets on top of you, he is deadly. He is dangerous. The only problem is he has some glaring holes in his game, and those holes can be filled by Michael Johnson. He has a hard time with pressure. He doesn't respond well to someone who fights behind a jab. And those are two of the best things that Michael Johnson does. Now, Michael Johnson comes to us from The Ultimate Fighter, and he's basically, again, another 500 or less fighter in the UFC. But he is exciting. He's incredibly fast. He always brings the fight, and he's got an insane knockout of Dustin the Diamond Poirier, who very recently touched UFC gold. This is a guy who, on the right night, when he is on, can beat the upper echelon of the division. However, more often than not, he gets worn down and he manages to let a decision slip away from him. So this is a spot where we've got a guy who's just serviceable. That's the best way I can describe Michael Johnson. He's got a serviceable skill set. He will beat the lower end of the division, and every once in a while he'll have a damn good night and he'll beat somebody better than him. And then we've got a guy in Thiago Moises who is essentially, I don't want to call him a busted prospect just yet. He's 25 years old. Kid's got a lot of room to grow. He can make some adjustments. He can come back better. The world is his oyster. Thiago Moises should win this fight, but for some reason my gut's telling me that Michael Johnson's going to knock him the hell out.
Is there a move that you're going to be making?
I need to do more research, Jimmy, and I hate to give that answer on a betting show, but you're going to have to follow me on Twitter at DieHardMMAPod to see if I pull that trigger, because I am not sure which way I want to go on this fight. It's very, very close. Whichever guy can implement their game plan is gonna win this fight. My gut is telling me that Michael Johnson's gonna have his day here simply because he's got a favorable matchup. The problems that he is going to pose for Moises are ones that he struggled with in his last 3 fights in a row. So unless he's gone back to the drawing board, made some serious adjustments, if you're betting on Moises, you're simply betting on a shot in the dark. You are praying, you are leaping off the cliff and hoping that you're right.
Let's hear if Boston Nick has a plan of attack in this lightweight bout. It's a pick'em, Nick.
It is. It's a pick'em. It's a pick'em for a reason. Flip a coin, honestly. But we do have Michael Johnson moving back up to 155 from that 145 division he dropped down to, which he's not had much success. So I do like him back up here at 155. He is definitely the better boxer between the two. There are a lot of intangibles in this fight. Moises has been a little bit busier, and in my opinion, he's had that grappling match against Wagner Rocha. Michael Johnson, though, he's a great wrestler. So I don't think this gets to the mat. If it does, Johnson could be in some trouble. The short notice fight for both these guys, there's a reason these bookies line this at pick'em. But I'm with Clinton this one. I'm favoring Johnson here. I'm not sure if I'm going to make a bet on it yet. If I can get Johnson at plus odds, I think that's when I will pull the trigger. But other than that, I think it's a hard pass because it's a tough fight to call.
Lightweight bout. Michael the Menace Johnson, Thiago Moises. At this point, no triggers pulled. No triggers pulled. Let's move on to the final fight of the preliminary card. Let's call it the main event of the preliminary card. Heavyweight bout, the big boys. We start the preliminary card with the big boys. We close out the preliminary card with the big boys. 6'3" Belarusian Andre the Pitbull Arlovski. 28-18-0 plus 125 dog. Going up against a man making his UFC debut, fresh off picking up a cool $1 million. Philippe Lins at minus 150. Boston Nick, take it away.
I mean, you're right. He picked up that quick mill. The guys he beat weren't the best. They're not UFC caliber. He was rocked by the Spartan pretty hardcore during that PFL run to the tournament W to get that mill. But that showed me that he can take a punch and he can also give a punch and capitalize on that and win a fight after being hurt. I do believe Andre Arlovski is a shell of himself. Yeah, he's looked okay. He had like this weird resurgence for like 2 fights and then went back to the same shit. I can't pick Clint. What is he, 41 or 42?
He's 41 years old.
41. And I think Clint has a rule, and sometimes I got even a rule on that. And a fighter that's been chinny at that age, I'm not going to take somebody that just won $1 million in the tournament, even though the fighters weren't. Listen, I think if Andre Arlovski was in that tournament, he would have got beat. So that being said, I'm on Lins. I'm on that minus 150. I can't wait to see what inside the distance is for Lins. I know it's going to be a plus odds. I think that's the bet I'm going to make, though, once I can get that Lins inside the distance prop bet out.
Lins inside the distance for Boston Nick, a.k.a. Mr. Fat Fist. Clint, what do you think of Boston Nick taking a UFC debut, Philippe Lins, as a favorite here?
So here's the thing, Jimmy. Nick is absolutely right. I have a rule that you do not bet on fighters that are 40 years or older because Father Time is undefeated and he eventually catches us all. It doesn't matter how good you are. When you hit that 40-year-old mark, there are very precious few fighters who have been able to hit that point and keep on rolling. Most of them drop off a cliff at that point. So if you've got a damn good reason to bet somebody who's 40 or older, you go for it. But if you don't have a damn good reason and it's close, you stay the hell away from it. And I am very tempted to bet on Andre Arlovski here, Jimmy. Ooh. So the concept of Arlovski being chinny is a myth. The man got cracked several years ago. He lost a couple fights in a row via TKO, and the narrative was, no chin, it's gone. Anybody can knock him out. The man has reinvented himself. He's taken massively less damage over the last 5 years of his career. And in fact, he has only been knocked out by the heaviest power punchers of the UFC in their prime. His last 3 knockout losses have come from Jairzinho Rosenstruck and Francis Ngannou, and a Walt Harris who was popped by USADA for performance-enhancing drugs. So the literal 2 hardest hitters in the UFC knocked him out. I'm not going to look too far into that.
Maybe 3.
And then Walt Harris, if you want to count him, he is very close to that top tier of puncher, and he was juiced to the gills when he did it. Everybody else that Andre Arlovski has fought has not been able to crack that ironclad chin. He does go to decisions. He has been robbed several times. He's lost some very, very close, hairy decisions. The dude still got it. And Philippe, not sure how to pronounce that. Lynn's
Oh, no.
No, you don't.
on the flip side of this thing.
Yeah.
This isn't a 28-year-old prospect coming in here into the UFC. This is a 34-year-old man who has had chin issues of his own. And like Nick said, in the PFL tournament, he got rocked. He also has a very risk-adverse style, Jimmy. He likes to hang back. He does not push the action. He only wants to counter-strike with you, which means to me, Andre Arlovski is going to be the forward-moving fighter. When you've got a big man who is the one coming forward, he's the one pushing the action, he's the one landing most of the shots, the judges tend to favor that.
He's also the one with the chin in the air.
I don't know how often Andre Arlovski's chin is really in the air, though, Nick. I don't agree on that point.
Coming forward, I think it's going to be in the air. I don't know.
Well, let's look at a couple of stats here. Andre Arlovski is one of the most storied careers in the UFC. He's fought everybody. He's been around forever, and he averages 3.55 significant strikes per minute, and he only absorbs 2.69. He is outstriking his opponents by a full significant strike per minute on average over the course of his entire career. And as I mentioned, a couple of his recent fights, he has been robbed. There was a couple that I believe he won. He fought very closely to a split decision with Augusto Sakai, who is a very, very hot prospect at 14-1 in the UFC. Jimmy, if this line gets a little bit wider, I'm going to sit back because everyone's going to see Lynn's just won the PFL. He's the $1 million winner. This kid should be hot shit coming into the UFC. If that line gets too wide, I'm going to hammer Andre Arlovski going the other way because Lynn's has chin issues. I see holes in his game, and the boy is waking up in silk sheets, Jimmy. He just won $1 million. You come over to the UFC, and your first fight is not a sexy matchup. You're on the undercard against 41-year-old Andre Arlovski. Is that the fight that you got out of bed for? I don't know if it is. Not to mention the fact that in the PFL, I don't think USADA has a say, Jimmy. He may end up having to get a new doctor. And if his cycle is off, if he doesn't get his good meds, we might see a shell of him in this fight. There's a decent chance Andre Arlovski pulls this upset.
Before we get to the Boston Nick rebuttal, what would you say is the profit line for Andre Arlovski? At what number do you pull the trigger?
That's what
anything in the ballpark of plus 160, I'd say. If you're around plus 160, plus 170, which again, we're talking about a guy that just won the PFL. I expect money to come in on him. We may get there. I do not want to bet on Andre Arlovski just because. I have to have a damn good reason. And if I have a value line like plus 160 or plus 170 on a fighter who I think can keep this fight close, competitive, and may even be the one to land the bomb, because with the big boys, Jimmy, the power is the last thing to go. Andre can still crack. If I get a good line, I might take it.
I like it. Boston Nick, rebuttal.
Honestly, I think that if you get that line, it's going to trap you. That's a trap bet right there, Andre Arlovski. I mean, I just don't see him getting it done here. I feel like Philippe Lenz is going to show up. There's a reason why they brought him into the UFC. It's not just because he won $1 million. It's because he's the real deal. Those matchmakers, know for a fact that he's UFC caliber. They wouldn't bring him in. And I think they're using Andre Arlovski's name to leapfrog Philippe, whatever you want to call him, Lenz, to the front of the division. And not front of the division, but to better fighters. I like Lenz here. I want to see what this inside the distance is because I believe that he does shell out a big whooping on Arlovski.
I like it. That is the main event of the preliminary card. Andre the Pitbull Arlovski going up against Philippe Linz. Follow us on Twitter, Odds110. Also subscribe to our YouTube page right now if you're watching Odds HQ. Check us out at odds.com. Big thank you to our guys, Boston Nick and Clint, star of the Die Hard MMA podcast. Get that cash on Wednesday night, Jacksonville, Florida.
I hit you with a mop. Better watch your friends, they quick to turn the odds. And that bitch nigga will play you for a thought. Ain't no Star Wars, yeah, my shit go TikTok. Jumping in out the bed.